A cold parting. As the monitor marked each beat, she gritted her teeth, alone in a white room, where the echo of silence weighed more than the pain of childbirth. Hundreds of miles away, he toasted with another woman, oblivious to what was happening. There were no flowers, no calls, no hands to hold hers. Just one decision, never again to expect anything from a man who couldn't be there. And when he walked through the door, believing everything would be the same, he was met with something that neither his power nor his ego could stop. This is not a story of revenge. It is a story of self-love, of family, and of the strength of a woman who chose to start over. Outside, the spring sun shone brightly over Madrid, but inside Clara's penthouse, the air hung heavy like lead. From the large glass windows of the living room, the Retiro Park stretched out like a vibrant green stain, framed by the clear sky and stately buildings. However, despite the view, the enveloping silence, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, Clara Valdez could not find peace. Her 9-month pregnant body awkwardly settled into the white linen sofa as she ran a hand over the tense curve of her belly. Mateo moved inside with the force of a restless child, as if he sensed that something in the air wasn't quite right. Alexander had not yet left the bedroom. She could hear him walking with confident steps on the wooden floor, closing zippers, talking on the phone in that low tone of voice he reserved for negotiations. Clara knew his every gesture by heart. After 6 years of marriage, she had learned to read the silences between his sentences, the way his gaze would shift a half-second before he lied. It was not an intuition she wanted to have, but the pregnancy had made her more sensitive, less willing to ignore the obvious. When Alexander finally appeared in the living room, he was dressed in an impeccable dark blue suit, a luxury watch gleaming on his wrist, and his hair precisely combed. He looked exactly as he did on the covers of financial magazines. Confident, successful, unquestionable. He held a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, which he offered to her with a perfectly calibrated smile. "For you, darling," he said, and sat down across from her. Clara accepted the cup, although she had no appetite. She had felt a knot in her stomach for days, one that was not due to the pregnancy. Her husband looked at her, carefully assessing her expression. She smiled slightly. "What time is your flight?" she asked in a neutral voice. "In an hour and a half. I'm going straight from here with the company car. The jet is taking me to Copenhagen. Key meeting with investors. I promise to be back before the weekend." Clara nodded without saying anything. She watched him avoid holding her gaze for more than a few seconds. There was something rehearsed about his entire speech, as if every word were measured. Years ago, she would have been convinced of his sincerity. Today, she had learned to detect the cracks. "Who are you meeting with exactly?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "With the Danish team and a Norwegian fund," he replied without hesitation. But his eyes sought hers too quickly, as if checking to see if she believed him. The silence that followed was dense. Only the noise of distant traffic, muffled by the double-paned windows, broke the stillness. Clara took a sip of the coffee without tasting it. Alexander approached and knelt in front of her. He took her hands with an almost theatrical tenderness. "Clara, if you have any real contractions, just one, call me. The plane will be on standby. I swear I'll come right back." She looked at him, searching for something genuine in his face. She had done it so many times. She had defended him to her sister, Lucy, to her own conscience, denying the perfume scents on his shirts, the mood swings after business trips. But that morning, something inside her broke. It wasn't anger yet, or pain. It was a sad, silent certainty. "Okay," she whispered. Alexander smiled and kissed her forehead. Then he stood up and picked up his leather briefcase. "I love you," he said as he walked away. "I love you too," Clara replied in a faint voice, watching his back as he disappeared down the hallway. The lie tasted like ash. The front door closed with a faint click. Then, the penthouse was silent again. Clara remained motionless for a long moment, clinging to the coffee cup as if it were an anchor. Then, she took a deep breath and placed the cup on the glass table. She got up with effort, walked to her desk, and turned on her laptop. Her fingers trembled as she typed into the browser, "Private flight tracking Spain." It was a trick Lucy had taught her in a casual conversation months ago. Her heart pounded when the result appeared. A jet registered to Nurax, Alexander's company, had a flight plan not to Copenhagen, but to Malaga. Malaga! The word hit her like a slap. Images of luxury hotels by the sea, infinity pools, cocktails on private terraces. It was not a work destination. It was a place for escape, for lovers. The knot in her stomach tightened. Matteo moved inside her as if responding to her anguish. For a moment, her vision blurred. "This time, I'm going to find out," she thought. It wasn't jealousy. It was dignity. It was the need not to give birth alone while the man she still said she loved was sunbathing with another woman. She returned to the sofa, turned on her phone, and wrote a short message. "Lucy, come over as soon as you can. Urgent." She didn't have to say more. Her sister had always known when to show up. And this time, Clara didn't have the strength to pretend. The sun shone high over the Retiro, but inside that silent penthouse, a storm was just beginning to take shape. The inevitable truth. The pain arrived like an unexpected wave, just when Clara thought she could hold on a little longer. It was a dry, deep pull that pierced her lower back and stole her breath for a few seconds. She stayed still on the sofa, her fingers clutching the cushion, her face pale as another contraction appeared just minutes later. They were not false alarms. This time, she knew. Little Matteo was on his way, and he would do so without his father. She still felt the bitter taste of the discovery in her throat. Alexander's private jet was headed to Malaga, not Copenhagen, as he had assured her that morning. Malaga, with its postcard beaches, had nothing to do with Danish investors. Everything fit together too well. It wasn't the first time Clara had had doubts, but it was the first time the evidence was irrefutable. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to move. She couldn't be paralyzed. Matteo depended on her. She took a deep breath and wrote a second message to Lucy. "It's urgent. I'm having contractions." Only 10 minutes passed before the doorbell rang. Lucy, her hair wet from the spring drizzle, rushed in, a backpack over her shoulder and her phone in her hand. As soon as she saw her sister's face, she knew that it wasn't just the birth that was at stake. "Tell me I'm wrong," was the first thing Clara said, her voice choked by another wave of pain. Lucy didn't ask anything. She held her arm firmly as she helped her up from the sofa. "How far apart are the contractions?" 3 minutes. They're intense." "Then let's go. The taxi is downstairs." As they went down the elevator, Lucy took out her phone. In seconds, she was scrolling through social media, her fingers as fast as a pianist in full performance. Clara, between gasps, looked at her sideways. She didn't need words. Her sister knew what she was looking for. And when they got to the car, Lucy stopped short. "No way," she murmured, her voice tinged with anger. She showed Clara the screen. An Instagram story posted less than half an hour ago. The profile belonged to Natalie Rivers, Alexander's personal assistant. The video showed an infinity pool with a view of a garden full of bougainvillea, 2 glasses of champagne resting on the edge of the water, and then, briefly, 2 pairs of feet in the water. One of them, without a doubt, was Alexander's. Clara didn't need anything else. She felt a new contraction double her over inside the taxi. But this time, it wasn't just physical. It was betrayal that clung to her body. Why would he do it now? She groaned through gritted teeth. Because he thinks no one would dare look. Lucy didn't hesitate. Because he thinks he can get away with anything. The driver, an elderly man with a Castilian accent, looked in the rearview mirror with concern. "Are we going to Ruber International?" "Yes," Lucy replied with determination. "And quickly, please." The journey felt eternal. Clara breathed as best she could, her eyes closed, trying to hold herself together. Lucy held her hand, and at the same time wrote messages at full speed. To Isabel Ferrer, to her press contact, to a nurse friend who could help from the inside. The plan was forming almost by itself, guided by indignation and protective instinct. At the hospital, the nurses greeted her with efficiency. One of them recognized her last name and gave Clara a knowing smile, as if she already knew who her husband was. They took her to the labor room. Lucy didn't leave her side. "Have you written to him?" Clara asked between sighs. Lucy lowered her gaze to her phone. 4 times. It goes straight to voicemail. I left him messages. Clara is in labor. We're at Ruber, room 3. Everything. I also sent him Natalie's story, just in case he has a shred of decency left. Clara closed her eyes. Another contraction. This time stronger, more definitive. The monitor began to beep more intensely. A nurse hurried in and told them they would soon move her to the delivery room. Lucy leaned toward her sister. "You're not alone. We're almost there." Clara squeezed her hand hard. For the first time, she felt something more than pain. She felt focus. It was no longer just about suffering or crying. There was a goal, a purpose. She had to give birth, yes, but she also had to regain control of her life. And she wouldn't do it out of hatred, but out of certainty. Mateo would not be born in the midst of a lie. When they moved her to the operating room, Lucy stayed waiting outside, writing messages in silence. Among them, one was clear and direct. "Isabel, activate everything. It has already begun. We won't wait for him to deign to show up." From inside the room, Clara's first cry of childbirth was heard. It was a raw, vital sound, a woman's roar piercing through the pain with the force of someone who at that very moment was rebuilding herself. The storm had begun, and it didn't come alone. A mother's fury. "You are going to have this baby, and then we are going to burn his glass palace." Sometimes, an image is worth more than 1,000 excuses, and it also destroys 1,000 lies. The delivery room at Ruber International Hospital was white, almost blinding under the cold lights of the ceiling. Everything smelled of disinfectant and control, except for Clara, who felt broken, hot inside, like a storm trapped in flesh. The heart monitor beeped to the rhythm of the baby's accelerated heartbeats, and the creaks of the nurses' uniforms sounded like thunder around her. The contractions followed one another quickly, with force, as if her body knew it could not wait any longer. Lucy was by her side, standing, phone in hand, her expression tense. She didn't speak, but her eyes never stopped scanning the screen. She was like a sentry in the middle of chaos, firm, focused, even though she was boiling inside. The last time she had tried to call Alexander, he hadn't answered. Not a word, not a notification. Voicemail was his only response. Clara, panting, opened her eyes for a moment. "Has he responded?" "Nothing," Lucy said, without looking away from the phone. "Just silence, as always." Clara closed her eyes again. Another pain doubled her over from the inside. This time it was sharper. It wasn't just a contraction. It was rage. The certainty of having been abandoned, despised at the most vulnerable moment of her life. Not by a stranger, but by the man who had promised to be there. Lucy slowly lowered her phone. She took a deep breath. Then she opened Instagram again, almost out of inertia. Natalie Rivers had a public profile. She always had. She liked to be seen. She liked to show off the life she couldn't afford on her own merits. Lucy, with the expert fingers of a journalist, navigated through photos of cocktails on rooftops, gallery openings, dinners on exclusive terraces. Everything so curated, so calculated. And then she saw it. A story, published less than an hour ago. A short, panoramic video, filmed from an infinity pool, the water turquoise. In the background, olive groves cascaded under a sky splashed with pink and orange. The sound of female laughter, the clinking of glasses. Then, for a brief second, the camera went down, and 2 pairs of feet could be seen in the water. One with red nail polish, the other, larger, male, unmistakable. Lucy felt a knot in her throat. Her face changed. Her jaw hardened. "No way," she whispered. "What?" Clara asked, her voice muffled. Lucy hesitated for an instant. Then, she approached her. She showed her the video. Clara looked at it. Alexander's feet. She recognized them better than her own. She had massaged them for years after his long workdays. And there they were, in a luxury pool in the middle of Marbella, intertwined with those of his assistant, while she lay on that gurney, sweating, bleeding, fighting to bring their son into the world. It was as if the digital world had crashed into the physical one. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. Clara let out a cry that didn't sound human, a lament full of rage, pain, and desperation. The monitor beeped faster. The nurses came running. "High blood pressure," one of them said. "Clara, breathe with me." "Breathe, honey," another said, trying to calm her. But Clara couldn't breathe. The physical pain mixed with humiliation, with the total loss of control. She felt like a broken doll under a clinical light. She wanted to push the phone away from her sight, but it was too late. The image had been seared into her mind. Lucy, trembling, took her hand. "Listen to me," she said, lowering her voice with the firmest tone she could muster. "Forget him. He doesn't exist right now. Only you and Matteo matter. You're going to bring him into the world. You're going to be a mother. And when this is over, we'll take care of him. I promise." Clara looked at her sister. The love that burned in her eyes was the only thing that was real in that room. She squeezed her hand with a new, almost defiant force. For the first time in days, she felt she had the right to be angry, to defend herself, to choose not to be a victim. Another contraction shook her. The nurses asked to move her already. She was dilated. It was time. "Tell Isabel," Clara murmured, her teeth clenched. "I want the best. I want the shark. I want this not to go unpunished." Lucy nodded. "I've already contacted her. She's ready." The doctor entered at that instant. She had a calm, professional look. She spoke to Clara in a soft voice. "Come on, Mrs. Valdez. It's time to push. Your son is almost here." Clara closed her eyes, and when she did, she realized something. She wasn't just going to push her son into the world. She was also leaving behind the old Clara, the wife who kept silent, the woman who waited, the one who justified everything. That Clara was staying behind. The new one was being born now, along with her son, forged by betrayal, galvanized by a mother's righteous fury. Outside, the rain was stopping. The sky over Madrid was opening in clear streaks, and the storm, now, was her. The silent war. While Clara fought to bring a new life into the world, Lucy was planting the seed of a silent war. In the hallway outside the delivery room, with the footsteps of nurses in the background and the intermittent beeping of monitors, Lucy paced back and forth like a caged lion. The phone in her hand vibrated with notifications, but she knew who she had to contact at that moment. She dialed a number she had saved with a simple shark emoji. On the other end, a calm voice, low and firm. She answered immediately. "Isabel Ferrer?" "Speaking. With whom do I have the pleasure?" "Lucy Valdez. Clara Valdez's sister. My sister is in labor right now. Her husband, Alexander Fuentes, is in Marbella with his personal assistant. We have proof." There was a brief pause. Then, Isabel's voice took on a different nuance. Professional. Sharp. "Continue." "We have a screenshot of Natalie Rivers' public Instagram story with geolocation. A private flight record from Nurax to Malaga. Screenshots of messages and audios. And above all, we have a broken woman giving birth alone. Clara wants to initiate legal action." "Understood. Does he know you know?" "No. We'll continue to play along with the Copenhagen story." "Perfect." Lucy stopped in front of the hallway vending machine. She wasn't hungry, but she needed something to chew on, so she wouldn't scream. The sound of the elevator opening made her turn, but it wasn't anyone she recognized. "Can you send everything to the email address I'm going to give you?" Isabel asked calmly. "My legal team will get started as soon as we receive the documentation." Lucy took a folder from her backpack. She always carried paper backups, like a good journalist. She quickly scanned the documents with an app and sent them while she was talking. "Can you activate precautionary measures? If what you tell me is corroborated, and from what I see, it will be, yes. We will initiate a divorce lawsuit for aggravated adultery, a request for a restraining order, and a precautionary freeze of marital assets. As soon as he sets foot in Barajas, he will be trapped." Lucy smiled without joy. "That's what we want, for him to have no way out." The lawyer paused. Then her voice lowered, almost confidential. "Tell your sister not to contact him. Not a message, not a call. Absolute silence. Let him believe that everything is still the same. That way, the fall will be more effective. She's in the delivery room. She has no mind to write to him right now, but I'll remind her." Isabel ended the conversation with a dry phrase. "In less than an hour, you'll have our fee agreement in your email. My team is already tracing properties, accounts, and movements. Let him enjoy his last hours of peace." Lucy hung up and put her phone away with hands that were still tense. She took a deep breath. She forced herself to relax. She looked out the hallway window. The sky over Madrid was still gray, but in the distance, a small, clear patch was opening up. At that moment, a nurse came out of the room. She had a professional but gentle expression. "Family of Clara Valdez?" Lucy immediately approached. "How is everything going?" "She's in active labor. She's being strong. The baby is doing well. It will be a matter of an hour, maybe less." Lucy nodded and let herself fall into one of the seats in the hallway. She sat looking at the floor, the gray lines of the marble, and thought of her sister, of the years she had watched her give up herself for that marriage. Clara, always so proper, so elegant, so willing to give the benefit of the doubt. But that was over. She took out her phone again. She went to Natalie's profile. She knew that that woman couldn't resist visibility. She almost expected there to be more proof. And there they were, an old post in which she referred to Alexander as my tireless mentor, a comment with a double meaning, photos at company events where she always stood by his side. Lucy saved it all. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a cleansing, a rebuilding. An hour later, the email notification vibrated on her screen. It was Isabel Ferrer's contract, scanned and digitally signed. Attached were also the letter of intent for the court, the drafts of precautionary measures, and a list of assets registered in Alexander Fuentes' name. Lucy would forward it to Clara later. For now, her sister had to focus on bringing Mateo into the world. From the other side of the wall, a muffled, deep sound came. A long cry, a mixture of pain and power. Lucy stood up immediately. "That's my sister," she thought, "and no one will ever break her again." In the silence of the hallway, with the footsteps of nurses and the distant murmur of the city on the other side of the glass, Lucy felt that something had changed, that Clara was no longer the woman who had looked at her with insecure eyes a few hours ago. Something in her had awakened, and that new Clara was going to be a hurricane. When Alexander returns to Madrid, he will not find a house, a wife, or a reputation. The king's fall. Alexander returned to Madrid with a flower in his hand and a well-rehearsed lie on his tongue. On board his private jet, he had gone over the perfect speech again and again, that the meeting in Copenhagen had been extended longer than expected, that he had lost reception, that he barely had time to sleep. He carried a cheap snow globe from the Oslo airport in his briefcase as proof of that technical stop. He had even ordered white flowers for Clara. He planned to arrive at the hospital, kiss her on the forehead, apologize for his absence, and hold his son as if nothing had happened. The private runway at Barajas Airport looked quiet as evening fell. The jet taxied slowly toward the hangar. Alexander adjusted his tie and combed his hair with his fingers. He hadn't slept well for days, not out of remorse, but from the effort of covering every trace. He had deleted all of Natalie's photos, cleared the hotel reservations, and deactivated the location tags. In his mind, he was still in control. When the plane stopped, the staircase was deployed. Alexander descended with a firm step, his jacket slung over his shoulder, confident in himself. A few feet away, a black sedan was waiting for him on the runway. He assumed it was his usual driver, but when he approached, he realized that the person waiting for him wasn't Francisco. A short woman, with gray hair pulled back in an impeccable bun, a pearl gray pantsuit, and an imperturbable expression, watched him attentively. By her side, two suited men, large as pillars, stood firm. She took a step forward. "Mr. Alexander Fuentes?" she said in a clear voice, without raising it. "Yes," he replied, disconcerted. "Who are you? Where is my driver?" "My name is Isabel Ferrer. I am the lawyer for your wife, Clara Valdez." A slight shiver ran down Alexander's spine. The name was not unknown to him. Isabel Ferrer was a feared figure in Madrid's legal circles. The press nicknamed her the Iron Judge. Although she was never a judge, she simply won. Always. "I don't understand." He tried to smile, gesturing with the hand that held the snow globe. "I just got back. My wife is in labor. I was coming from work. I've been in Oslo. We know." Isabel interrupted him in a neutral, almost bored tone. "In fact, we have proof that your jet was not in Copenhagen or Oslo until after it landed in Malaga. We know everything." One of the bodyguards stepped forward and handed him a thick manila envelope. Alexander took it with hands that were beginning to tremble. "What is this?" "A divorce lawsuit for adultery, a temporary restraining order on marital assets, and a court order that prevents you from entering the residence in the Salamanca neighborhood. From this moment on, you must not approach your wife, or your son, or the property. Nor can you move any assets until further notice." Alexander opened his mouth, but no words came out. The snow globe hung, useless, from his right hand. This must be a mistake. Clara wouldn't do this. You have profoundly underestimated the woman you married, Isabel replied. You thought she was an elegant decoration. You were wrong. She is the queen, and you have been cast out of the kingdom. Behind them, a dull click. A photographer, hidden in the distance, captured the scene, and next to him, standing, imperturbable, Lucy Valdez raised her phone as if she were toasting with him. Then, she turned and disappeared. Alexander took a step back, confused, looking for air. You can't do this to me, he murmured, pathetic even to his own ears. Of course we can, Isabel replied, already turning toward the sedan. In fact, it's already done. I recommend you get in the car. One of my assistants will take you to the hotel of your choice. In the meantime, your board of directors has already received a copy of this packet. Good luck. One of the men opened the back door. Alexander had no choice. He got in. The leather of the seat was cold. The manila envelope on his legs seemed to weigh a ton. He opened it. Irreconcilable differences, emotional cruelty, aggravated adultery. Attached were a flight log, a bill from the Marbella Hotel, and finally, a high-definition screenshot of the Instagram video. His feet and Natalie's intertwined in the pool. The caption, Paradise. The car started without a word. Outside, twilight was falling over Madrid. Alexander looked out the window, his breathing. His whole plan, his whole image, his control had evaporated. He was no longer a king returning to his castle. He was a man sitting in the back seat of a car with a useless globe in his hand and his reputation in tatters. At that moment, he understood that this time he had lost, and the real battle hadn't even begun. The aftermath news travels faster than private jets, and Alexander no longer had anywhere to hide. It was barely dawn in Madrid, and the headline was already on everyone's lips. CEO abandons his pregnant wife for a romantic getaway in Marbella. The news had exploded like a bomb in all national media. The country carried it on its digital front pages. The world opened its economy section with the fall in Nurex shares, and even the morning public television shows commented on the scandal with a cocktail of indignation and morbid curiosity. On social media, Alexander Fuentes' name was an absolute trend, accompanied by hashtags like #partingbetrayal and #justice4Clara. At Nurex headquarters, right on the Paseo de la Castellana, the atmosphere was tense. The hallways were silent. Employees who used to exchange jokes at the coffee machine avoided looking at each other. The private elevator that went up to the executive floor rose more slowly than usual, as if it knew what was about to happen. Alexander, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a pale face, entered through the back door of the building, wearing dark glasses and a poorly adjusted tie. He had spent the night in a discreet suite at the Palace Hotel, alone, surrounded by legal papers and bottles of sparkling water. His phone didn't stop vibrating with calls from journalists, messages from former partners, and Twitter notifications. He didn't answer any of them. He knew he couldn't control what was coming, but he at least wanted to talk to the board before others did. But it was already too late. As soon as he entered the meeting room, he found all the board members sitting, waiting for him in silence. Some with a grave expression, others outright furious. "Gentlemen, good morning," Alexander began, trying to sound serene. "I understand that the current situation requires an explanation. Allow me to put everything in context." They didn't let him continue. "Context?" interrupted the chairwoman of the board, a middle-aged woman with a firm voice. "After your personal life turns into a reputation crisis that has caused our shares to fall by 18% in 2 days?" Another member held up his phone. "It is true that he charged the hotel expenses in Marbella through a shell company linked to Nurax." Alexander tried to smile, a gesture more like a grimace. "It's an accounting error, something I will personally review." "And the video? Is that also an error?" Another asked, ironically. The silence was thick as oil. Alexander knew he was losing control, the same control he had always boasted about. That aura of infallibility was slipping through his fingers. He tried to change the focus. "The technology we have built is still solid. This doesn't affect the product. It's a passing storm." "The storm may pass, but not with you," the chairwoman said. "We need to send a clear message to the market. The board has decided by a majority that you take an indefinite leave, effective immediately." There was no discussion. Alexander understood that he had no choice. It wasn't even a formal expulsion. It was something more elegant, more lethal. Silent exile. He left the building through the same back door, where a cloud of photographers was already waiting with cameras ready. A security guard escorted him to the car. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at him. The respect that had once surrounded him had evaporated. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, in the penthouse in the Salamanca neighborhood, Clara held Matteo in her arms. The child was sleeping with his mouth slightly open, his tiny fists clenched, completely oblivious to the storm that was swirling around his existence. Clara was sitting by the window in cotton pajamas, with a soft blanket over her legs. Next to her, on the low table, a tablet showed the news. There was no sound. It wasn't necessary. The images were enough. Alexander leaving the airport with a haggard face, the photos of the hotel, Isabel Ferrer's legal statements, and even a brief interview with Lucy, who had simply said, "My sister is not alone, and she is not going to stay silent." Clara didn't smile. She didn't feel victorious. She felt peace. A serene, firm peace, born from pain, but settled in something deeper. There was no revenge in her eyes, only determination. The tablet vibrated. It was a new email from Isabel. The subject line read, "Valdez Foundation, registration approved." Clara opened it and read it in silence. The ministry had officially approved the creation of the Valdez Foundation, whose purpose would be to offer legal and psychological assistance to women who are victims of economic, emotional, or social abuse by their partners. Its first office would be in Chambéry. It had enough funds to operate for at least 5 years without the need for external donations. Clara looked at Matteo. His tiny fingers closed around hers with unexpected strength. "Everything is going to be all right," she whispered. "I promise." At that moment, Lucy entered the living room with a tray of coffee and toast with olive oil and tomato. She placed them on the table and sat down beside her. "Have you seen it?" "Yes." "Do you feel better?" "It's not about that. I feel free." Lucy nodded. Then she held out a cup of coffee. "Let's toast," she said, raising it slightly. "To the beginning of the end." Outside, Madrid continued with its routine. Trams passed. People strolled through the Retiro. The markets opened their doors. The city remained firm, just like Clara, just like her new life would. A new fight. 4 years of silence can seem like an eternity, until the past comes knocking on your door. It was a quiet autumn afternoon in Madrid. The orange leaves crunched underfoot on the sidewalk, and the pale gray sky seemed to hold a long, contained breath. In the main office of the Valdez Foundation, located on a quiet street in Chambéry, Clara was reviewing a particularly delicate file. It was the case of a woman from Andalusia who was fighting for custody of her children against a powerful and manipulative ex-husband. The story felt painfully familiar. The office smelled of freshly brewed coffee and new paper. Mateo, now almost 4 years old, was at school, and Clara took advantage of the morning hours to work in peace. She wore a light cardigan and a simple blouse, her hair in a relaxed bun. She seemed at peace, and in a way, she was. Until her phone rang. It was Isabel Ferrer. "Yes?" Clara answered serenely. "He's back," the lawyer said bluntly. Clara fell silent, the pen suspended in the air. "Where?" "He landed this morning in Barajas." "He's already in Madrid. His lawyers have contacted me. Alexander wants to request visitation rights." The words floated in the air like sharp glass. Clara closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. For 4 years, Alexander had not sent a single postcard, not a single call, not a single birthday present for his son. He had signed the divorce agreement without a fight and had disappeared like a shadow. Now he was returning, and he wanted to see Mateo. "What arguments are they presenting?" she asked in a controlled voice. "The usual," Isabel said with a hint of annoyance. "He claims he has changed, that he has been rehabilitated, that he feels profound remorse, that he wants to get back the relationship with his son before it's too late." Clara placed the pen on the table gently. "I guess his business ventures in Dubai didn't work out as he expected." "Exactly," Isabel confirmed. "My sources say he lost capital in a startup that didn't take off. He's far from bankruptcy, but he's no longer on his golden Olympus. And as often happens with men who lose power, they look back for some way to regain it." Clara didn't respond immediately. She stood up and walked to the window. She watched the branches of a plane tree shake in the wind. In the reflection of the glass, she saw her own face, more serene, firmer than it had been years ago. "He's not going to get it from me," she finally said, "or from my son. Fight him, Isabel. Use everything we have." "Of course," the lawyer replied. "But you must prepare yourself. He'll try to go to the media. He'll want to present himself as a repentant father, a victim of the system, and you as the cold woman who prevents him from seeing his son." Clara took a deep breath. It didn't surprise her. Alexander had always known how to manipulate narratives, but this time she was not the same. When she hung up, she remained silent for a moment, processing the information. Then the office door opened, and Lucy appeared, her expression alert. "Isabel called me. Do you know already?" Clara nodded. "Yes, he's back." Lucy closed the door behind her and sat down opposite, resting her elbows on the table. "He has no shame. 4 years without showing up, and now he wants to pose as a model father." "I know," Clara said, "but it's not going to be easy. If he moves cunningly, he can win sympathy. People forget quickly." Lucy snorted. "So what are we going to do?" Clara looked up. There was no longer any doubt in her eyes, only determination. Whatever it takes. Minutes later, she was in her penthouse in the Salamanca neighborhood, reviewing old digital folders on her laptop. Everything was well archived. Divorce documents, statements, flight logs, screenshots. It wasn't revenge she was looking for. It was foresight, protection, for her and for Mateo. The next day, upon picking up her son from school, she ran into a mother from the parents' group. She asked, casually, if it was true that Mateo's father had returned. Clara smiled politely, but did not answer. It wasn't the time to go into battle. Not yet. That night, while Mateo colored on the living room table with markers, Clara served him a glass of milk with cookies. The boy, without looking up, showed her his drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands and a bright sun above. "Who are they, sweetheart?" she asked tenderly. "You, Aunt Lucy. And me," the little one replied naturally. Clara hugged him tightly. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The family was already complete, and she would not allow anyone to come and break it. It's no longer about him. It's about us. The television stage. A camera turned on can change public opinion or expose your empty soul. The set of the public channel was decorated with neutral colors, warm light, and instrumental background music. Everything was calculated to inspire trust, closeness, emotion. The host, a woman with a kind smile and compassionate eyes, looked at her guest attentively as the cameras filmed in silence. Sitting across from her, dressed in a dark suit without a tie, was Alexander Fuentes, thinner than he had been years ago, with disguised dark circles under his eyes and a carefully controlled demeanor. The repentant magnate was back. "Thank you for joining us tonight," the journalist said. "We know it hasn't been easy for you to take this step." Alexander nodded with a measured smile. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think it's important to speak from the heart when you have nothing left to lose." Clara watched everything from the sofa in her penthouse, with Mateo already asleep in his room. Lucy was sitting beside her, her arms crossed and one eyebrow raised. On the coffee table, the cups of chamomile tea were still steaming. The television showed a close-up of Alexander, his voice stoic and his gaze full of what, at first glance, seemed like sincerity. "During these years," he said, "I have made mistakes, many, but the biggest one was moving away from my son. Not a day goes by that I don't regret it. I have watched him grow up alone in photographs, in press clippings, and each image has hurt me like a new wound." The host nodded with a pained expression. The background violins rose slightly in volume. "Do you think you still have time to rebuild that bond?" "I hope so. I ask for nothing more than a chance. I don't want to replace anyone, just to be present, to get to know him, to know what he likes, what he dreams about, to be a part, even if a small one, of his life." Lucy snorted. Clara continued to watch without blinking. "He's rehearsed it," Lucy said. "Every word. It's brilliant. I admit it. He has just the right tone of vulnerability, without seeming weak." Alexander continued. "I don't blame Clara. I know I made her suffer, and I understand if she holds a grudge, but I want her to know that I'm not here for me. I'm here for him." The camera made a slow pan over the host's face, her eyes already slightly moist. Some members of the audience applauded. Clara, without taking her eyes off the screen, reached out and took the remote control. She pressed the button, and the television went blank. Silence filled the room. "You don't want to watch the end?" Lucy asked. "I've already seen everything," Clara replied. "What comes next will be more of the same." Lucy watched her. On her face there was no anger, no sadness. There was something more solid. A tense calm, the kind of serenity that precedes an irrevocable decision. At that moment, Clara's phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Isabel Ferrer. "I expected this. Don't worry, I have a few things up my sleeve. We'll talk tomorrow." Clara read it, and then showed it to her sister. "Do you think it's what I think it is?" Lucy smiled with a mixture of irony and relief. "If what you think is a masterful twist, yes." The next morning, social media was divided. Many praised Alexander for his courage in exposing himself. Others recalled the pool video, the abandonment in the middle of childbirth, the 4-year disappearance. Some headlines were benevolent, the return of a father. Others harsher, redemption or strategy. Clara did not issue any statements. She did not give interviews. She did not write a single line on social media. She continued with her routine. She took Mateo to the Retiro Park, where they played with dry leaves and laughed as the little one hung from the swings. Someone photographed them from a distance. The next day, a magazine published the image with the headline, "The Strong Mother." Clara Valdez responds with silence. That night, on the terrace of the penthouse, while Mateo was sleeping, Clara and Lucy shared a glass of wine. "I told you so," Lucy commented. "He was going to try to manipulate the entire country." "Yes," Clara admitted, taking a slow sip. "But what he doesn't know is that now I'm not alone, not even in my defense." Lucy raised her glass. "To Isabel Ferrer and her ace up her sleeve." Clara gently clinked her glass with her sister's. "And to what's to come." Somewhere in the city, Alexander was celebrating the good reception of his interview with his new lawyer. But he still didn't know that the real blow would not come from the media or from the public, but from the past. Isabel calls tomorrow, and when she does, nothing will ever be the same again. The final verdict: there are betrayals that burn, and others that redeem. The Madrid family court stood sober and cold under the cloudy November sky. The worn stone steps, the imposing columns, and the main entrance flanked by guards seemed more intimidating than usual. The media crowded the sidewalk, microphones ready, cameras on. It was the trial everyone was waiting for. Alexander Fuentes, the disgraced former magnate, faced Clara Valdez for the right to see his son, Mateo. The room was austere, with polished wooden benches and white lighting that did not forgive wrinkles or tense expressions. Clara was sitting next to Isabel Ferrer, dressed in a dark blue suit and a cream-colored blouse. Her face was serene, but her hands, clasped in her lap, betrayed her internal tension. On the other side, Alexander maintained a contrite posture, in a light gray suit and a folder of documents in front of him. His lawyer, a young man with the air of a rising star, whispered instructions in his ear. The judge, a woman in her 60s with short hair and reading glasses, opened the session with a firm voice. "We are here to hear the request of Mr. Alexander Fuentes regarding visitation rights for his minor son, Mateo Fuentes Valdez. The defendant, Clara Valdez, is present and represented by her lawyer, Ms. Isabel Ferrer." "Let's begin." Alexander's lawyer took the floor. In a temperate voice, he spoke of reflection, of past mistakes, of the redemption of a man who had hit rock bottom and wanted to reconnect with his son. He showed photographs of Alexander at recent charity events, a handwritten letter addressed to Mateo, and even a psychological report that certified his recovered emotional maturity. "My client is not looking to intrude," he concluded. "He only wishes to get to know the child he brought into the world. He is willing to begin with supervised visits without disrupting the child's stability." The judge nodded slightly and looked toward Isabel Ferrer. "Ms. Ferrer." Isabel stood up with the air of someone who plans every move weeks in advance. "Your Honor, we are not going to deny the facts. Mr. Fuentes is the biological father of Mateo, but he is not the father who has been present. He has shown no interest, no affection, and no responsibility for the past 4 years. During that time, Mateo has been raised with love, stability, and an emotional structure that does not include Mr. Fuentes. And now that his public image has fallen, he intends to use this child as a bridge to redemption." The judge took notes without changing her expression. Isabel took a deep breath and looked directly at Alexander. "But there is something more," she added. "A testimony that dismantles any narrative of sincere repentance." She turned toward the courtroom door. It opened, and a woman entered, who made Alexander's face instantly pale. Natalie Rivers. She was dressed soberly, in a beige suit, without flashy makeup, her hair pulled back in a low bun. She walked with a firm step, without looking at her former lover. She sat down in front of the judge, and after swearing to tell the truth, she began to speak. "During my relationship with Mr. Fuentes, I was a direct witness to his opinions about his unborn child. I heard him refer to the pregnancy as a complication, and say that a child would only bring distraction to his professional life. On multiple occasions, he assured me that he did not plan to be present at the birth, that it was a formality that could be dispensed with. She presented archived conversations, message screenshots, even a confidentiality agreement that he had asked her to sign when their relationship ended, in exchange for a considerable sum. I have come here because, after these years, and now that I have my own family, I cannot remain silent. A child is not a trophy to clean up mistakes. It is a life, and it does not deserve to be used as a public excuse. The entire room fell silent. Clara did not look at Alexander. She just lowered her head slightly, as if finally a heavy weight had been lifted from her back. Isabel, for her part, maintained her expression intact. The judge took a few minutes to read the documents presented. Then, she looked up and addressed Alexander. "Mr. Fuentes, according to the law, you have the right to request visitation, but you also have the duty to demonstrate a real, sustained, and respectful commitment to the minor's well-being. What I have seen here is not that. I see an attempt to clean up a public image, not to rebuild a family relationship." Alexander looked down. "The request for visitation is denied," the judge declared. "And my advice is that you accept the consequences of your actions and leave this family in peace." The sound of the gavel hitting the table was dry and definitive. Outside the courtroom, the photographers were waiting. But Clara did not stop. She walked out flanked by Isabel and Lucy, her step firm, her gaze forward. She did not offer any words. She did not need to. For an instant, her gaze crossed with Alexander's, still standing next to the witness stand. She saw him defeated, not repentant, just furious and alone. Clara did not flinch. That night, at home, while Mateo slept, Clara poured 2 glasses of wine and sat down next to Lucy on the terrace. "You know what the best part of it all was?" Lucy asked, smiling. "That the winning card was her, Natalie." Clara nodded, raising her glass. "People change. Or maybe they just get tired of the lies." And for the first time in years, she toasted not to having won, but to having protected what she loved most. A luminous scar. He has lost, and we no longer look back. Peace doesn't always come with silence. Sometimes it comes with the firm voice of a mother who no longer doubts. It was a Sunday morning in Madrid. The clear blue sky, the gentle spring sun filtering through the balconies of the Salamanca neighborhood, the streets still quiet, the cafes just beginning to set up tables outside, and the aroma of toast with olive oil and tomato floating in the air. In Clara Valdez's penthouse, the day began with a new but deeply symbolic ritual. Mateo, now a full 4 years old, ran back and forth in his astronaut costume. He had decided that that day he wanted to travel to the moon from the living room. Lucy followed him with a broomstick that served as a rocket as she laughed out loud. Clara watched them from the open kitchen, preparing breakfast with calm movements. Her hair was in a low braid, and she wore a light robe over her linen dress. On her face, for the first time in a long time, there was not a trace of tension. On the dining table, a black folder was waiting. Inside, the complete court resolution, Natalie's statements, the documents that legally protected Mateo. But it was not what Clara was looking at with attention. On top of the folder, there was a new page. A formal request for a change of last name. Mateo would soon be named Mateo Valdez. And that was all. The doorbell rang softly. Lucy went to open it and returned accompanied by Isabel Ferrer, always impeccable. This time with a wine-colored scarf and a warmer smile than usual. "Am I just in time for coffee?" she asked lightly. "Always," Clara replied, pouring her a cup. The three of them sat down while Matteo built his lunar rocket with cushions. Isabel placed an envelope on the table. "This just arrived from the ministry. Approved. The change of last name will be official in 3 weeks." Clara nodded. She did not celebrate with words. She just closed her eyes for a second. A cycle was closing, one that began with pain and that was now ending with clarity. "And him?" Lucy asked. "Alexander left Madrid yesterday," Isabel replied. "He went back to Dubai. Apparently, he has a new technology project, but the local press is no longer following him. He's out of the spotlight. Alone." There was a brief silence, not uncomfortable, but respectful, as if they all understood that that story, although not named, was no longer a part of their lives. "I don't feel hatred," Clara suddenly murmured. "And that's what surprises me the most. I'm not happy about his fall. I'm happy about our new life." Lucy took her hand for a moment. Isabel nodded with a serene gesture. "It's because you no longer need to hate. You are already free." A few hours later, they went out together to Retiro Park. It was a day for families, for children on bicycles, for elderly people walking slowly, for soft street music at the entrance to the Rosaleda. Clara held Matteo's hand, while he pointed to every dog, every bird, every fallen leaf, as if it were the first time he had seen them. When they got to the pond, they sat on a bench. Matteo ate an ice cream, and Clara watched him in silence. "You know," she said, not looking at anyone in particular, "for a long time, I thought that motherhood was something I had to prove, that I had to be perfect, silent, balanced, like a statue. But now I understand that's not it. That being a mother is also crying with your child, laughing for no reason, losing your mind sometimes, and still moving forward." Lucy looked at her with a luminous smile. "You are the best mother Matteo could have, because you choose him every day, and because you choose yourself, too." As night fell, back at home, Clara received an unexpected email. It came from a journalist from El País requesting an interview. Not to talk about scandals, it said, but to get to know the woman who rebuilt her world. Clara read it calmly, then marked it as read, and did not respond. She didn't need to tell anything more. Her story was already told where it mattered, in the hugs of her son, in the knowing look of her sister, in the security of her home. That night, before going to bed, Matteo got into his mother's bed with a book in his hand. "Read to me, Mommy." Clara looked at him, pushed a lock of hair off his forehead, and nodded. "Of course, my love. Which one do you want?" "This one," he said, pointing to one about space. Clara opened the book and began to read, in a soft voice. As she did, she thought about everything she had left behind. The tears, the doubts, the betrayal, and above all, the fear. She was no longer afraid of the past. She had faced it, chapter by chapter, and she had overcome it. When Matteo fell asleep, she stayed a few more minutes by his side. She caressed his forehead and whispered something that he didn't need to understand now, but that he would remember someday. "You are the beginning of all the good that came after." And as she turned off the light, Clara knew that the real journey was not the one that had begun with Alexander, but the one that continued now, only with Matteo, with Lucy, with everything she chose to build from love. The past no longer hurts, because the present, finally, shines.